All right, so the White House is responding to criticism from some of the president's vocal supporters after they questioned the rationale for the war against Iran, among them Tucker Carlson and Megyn Kelly. Also, Marjorie Taylor Greene, who has recently broken with the president on a number of issues. And then there's Matt Walsh, who posted this to social media. Quote, "So far, we've heard that although we killed the whole Iranian regime, this war was not a regime change war. And although we obliterated their nuclear program, we had to do this because of their nuclear program. And although Iran was not planning any attacks on the U.S., they also might have been depending on who you ask. And although we are not fighting this war to free the Iranian people, they are now free, or might be, depending on who seizes power. And we have no idea who that will be. The messaging on this thing is, to put it mildly, confused." White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt issued a long rebuttal to that. And President Trump hit back at Carlson and Kelly, saying, quote, "I think that MAGA is Trump. MAGA's not the other two," adding that Kelly should, quote, "study her history book a little bit."
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, you look at what's happening here, and Jim Messina. Let's not confuse anybody. We are not saying that because of this war that's deeply offending the MAGA base, and because of the Epstein files, which we've seen has really had an impact on the MAGA base. Nobody's thinking, gee, in that base, gee, I should have gone out and voted for Kamala Harris. Nobody's saying, gee, I'm going to go out and get my AOC flag and wave it high above my house. What this does, and explain this, I mean, Donald Trump has been able to pull out people that have never voted before. He's been able to pull out young men, especially, that listen to Joe Rogan, Andrew Schultz, that listen to these people who've now turned on Donald Trump on so many of these issues. It's hard for me to imagine, but I'd love you to give me your insight. It's hard for me to imagine a worse 1-2 punch to depress your base than having the very people, Donald Trump, J.D. Vance, Stephen Miller, who were yelling against forever wars and Kamala Harris will take us into Iran, President Trump will never take us into Iran, and now we're doing that. That's the one punch, and the two punches, the Epstein files. This belief among the MAGA online that the Justice Department, rightly, a rightful belief, is covering up and protecting rich and powerful men. I mean, talk about what that does for your ability to get people out to the polls in an off-year election.
Well, Joe, when you talk about midterm elections, what you're really talking about is who's going to turn out. And when you look at the current Republican problem, in all these special elections around the country, Jonathan and I were just talking about this off camera, Dems are overperforming by 12.5 points. And when you look at why, it's not just Democratic enthusiasm. Republican enthusiasm has fallen through the floor. And I don't know who the brains behind their operation currently is, Joe, but if you want to start a foreign war, if you want to promise for 10 years you're going to be the guy that gets us out of foreign wars, we're now in different operations in 7 countries. At the same time, let's do the Epstein thing, apparently, which just incites your own base. You spend the entire time talking about issues that they care very deeply about. They've gotten no answers to. And what do we also know? We know at the same time, voters out there, swing voters who will decide these elections, are out there screaming, hey, this is all too expensive. I can't afford living. I can't afford health care. I can't afford gas. And so going into Iran is going to make my gas more expensive, and it's going to continue to distract a president from doing what they thought he won, what they thought he was going to do, which is focus on the economy. And so voters are really angry about this. 19% of independents say this Iran thing is a good idea. They're just screaming out for both parties to focus on them and not foreign wars.
David, how much do you think the outcome of this will affect how well this plays for President Trump and for the Republican Party going into the midterm elections? I mean, you and I were talking earlier about what the possible outcomes might be of a diminished Iranian regime that probably is still an Islamic republic of sorts, but without the kind of military capability that it's had to threaten American assets around the world for the last few decades. Is that a prospect? Is that a kind of outcome of this that Donald Trump, do you think, could sell as a win to the American public, to the skeptical American public, as Jim was saying?
I think one big issue is what level of American casualties there are. We should remember we're in the early days of this war. The reports that I get from people who follow it carefully are that Iranians are depleting their supplies of missiles and drones quickly with this spasm of attacks on the UAE, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait. So at some point, they're going to run out of those munitions. The U.S. is now moving into a more intense phase of bombardment. Both Secretary Hegseth and President Trump said that yesterday, that the big wave, to quote Trump, is about to begin. So by the end of this week, it may look a little more different on the ground. I still don't hear a clear account of what the end game is. They keep talking about what their objectives are, but they're things like depleting the number of missiles and bombing a nuclear program, but by their own account was already obliterated. So I think through this week, as the fighting intensifies, so too will the explanation to the American people. If it's as confusing as it was yesterday, I think they have a problem.
Jim, let me ask you about your new Substack piece, which I think Democrats will be smart to sort of flag and pin as they prepare for the midterms and beyond to the next presidential election. You argue Democrats need to build a relationship in an effort to stop losing all the young dudes. You get at things like TikTok, gaming, streaming, cryptocurrency, sports betting, prediction markets, and you kind of talk about a cultural reassessment as much as a policy reassessment. Can you it's a complicated issue, obviously, but if Democrats feel like they have an opportunity to get back some of these young men that they've been losing in recent elections, where do they start with that effort?
Well, Willie, I thought Joe would appreciate the all the young dudes David Bowie reference, first of all. Second of all, if you look at the issues, Dems bled young voters in historic numbers in the last presidential. And I think there's a view in my party that we just need to get on a couple Joe Rogan podcasts, or we need to hang out with tech bros and it'll all be fine. It's really just about, figuring out social media. And I think it's deeper than that. Right now, the party's saying no to a bunch of things that young male voters like and do every day, like video games, like sports betting, like prediction markets, like crypto. And they look at this and say, you're saying no to all these things. Maybe you're saying no to me, too. And I think the party's also always best, when we go back to the Clinton days or the Obama days, of being pro-innovation, pro-new things, things getting better. And right now, we're starting to be in this kind of being perceived by these voters as a nanny state and someone who's saying, no, you can't do these things. And I think that's a really dangerous place to be. Instead, we need to stop talking, listen to these young voters, and meet them where they are, not where we want them to be.
So, Jim, I wrote today about the fractures in the MAGA side because of the war in Iran following the Epstein matter. And no one's suggesting that Trump's basically going to completely abandon him, but there's perhaps some weakness there and maybe an opportunity, to your point, for Democrats to swoop in for some of those young men who broke for Trump in 2024 as opposed to Vice President Harris. Is this a phenomenon that we could see in play even today? It's the Texas primary. Closely watched, both sides, Democrats and Republicans, fierce battles. Give us your sense and also just your overall, what are you looking for tonight in what the first, I think, high wattage primary of the year? Yeah, this is the most exciting primary we've had so far. What I'm going to be looking at is two things. Are the young men coming back? Are they voting at all? Because that's a really important number. But more importantly in Texas, where are the Latinos going? When you look at some of these special elections, Dems are getting back the young voters and back the Latino voters that Donald Trump rented in 2024. This will be a really interesting night because you have both a really hotly contested Republican primary and a Democratic primary. And so when you and I look at the numbers tomorrow, we're going to look and see where the Latinos going. And if the Latinos are starting to come back to the Democratic Party in Texas, of all places, that is a very good sign for the Democrats in the midterm elections.